To the agenda. Minutes. Members. Are you happy with the minutes?
Yeah, forming is second.
Yes, Councillor Lily.
Oh,
you're
seconding.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. Do I need to initial topics? It seems to be working better. There we go. Thank you. Okay, members, declarations of interest. Nothing else. Councillor Lily.
In regards to items with the forward plan and the cabinets regarding Rye interchange, I'm a member of Rye Town Council and I'm also the Mayor of Rye.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, anybody else? Oh, Councillor Lily. Much to declare.
I will just declare, because I might raise questions under the performance rating regarding figures to do with children's services, and I just want to declare that my wife does work for Rye Council Children's Services.
Okay, thank you for that. Anybody else? No? Okay. Public questions, Mark. We haven't got any written public questions. Up in the gallery.
Thank you, Chair. I'm welcome much of what the new administration has been able to do to argue the case of driving down housing numbers, but I believe an important aspect has been missed out: the uninvited special case. And I believe that the UNESCO advisory status needs to be used and referred to more heavily in the island plan. I suppose a clear directive to draw together policies of human well-being and ecological health into one integrated approach to better island life, that being culturally, socially, economically and environmentally. So therefore, will the committee look into making a recommendation that the UNESCO advisory status is referred to more heavily and with greater force throughout the plan, as currently there is little reference in this at all, which I find quite astonishing, as it can be potentially transformational to reimagine what it means to be island white and drive down housing numbers. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yeah, well, probably the answer to that question is probably yes. I have no reason not to. And and I think you're probably right. It does need a lot more reference, and we will be dealing with all matters to do with planning, housing, etc. as well. Potentially on our work plan. Thank you for that. Any more questions? Right, next item 4 on the agenda. One thing I'll just say before we kick off, this seems to be working quite well, this microphone, I have to say. Make sure that you can speak clearly and loudly, because I have had some people say that the committees on the online service are not going to pick up very well, so if you can speak very loud and clear, that would be good. Thank you. Okay, quarter 4 performance and budget report members. Anybody have any questions or comments? Councillor Brew.
Thank you, Chair. It's interesting that certainly for the next few meetings, as we get quarterly performance reviews, they're going to be of the previous administration rather than the current one. So, as a member, they're really doing. I'm going to have some fun. Because no doubt this will get tougher in the future. I jest, of course, but I mean this is a reflection of the situation prior to the elections on May the 6th. I just like to focus initially, as part of my first questions tonight, and then I'll move over to let people ask questions, on the infrastructure and transport element of the QPMR, particularly Appendix 6 on page 75, where it talks about the strategic risk of the failure of the high-risk PFI contract resulting in significant financial and operational disruption for the council and its residents. It claims here that the inherent risk in this is red, but the target is green, and the current score is amber. And I find that quite unbelievable, to be frank. This council in recent times spent an inordinately large amount of money on a Mr. GS100 to achieve cuts in the contract with Highland Roads. And some of them have been brought to my attention, quite alarming actually. The people who were described by the previous administration as reductions in service, they're actually cuts in the service that we had, such as trimming and dimming of street lighting with the potential for street lights to be turned off at midnight each night in certain areas. A reduction in street cleaning services to the extent of £80,000. Reduction in grass cutting at £100,000 a year. Reduction in the number of traffic cameras which are used to assess the volume of traffic and speed of traffic on problematic roads. Issues regarding reduction in the collection of waste from litter bins and dog bin waste. A reduction in the number of staff and health tests. And in total, as I have been advised, £1.5 million worth of cuts to that contract, a contract that is essential to service to the Isle of Wight through the Isle of Roads contract. So I find it quite difficult to understand how the risk of this contract is amber, when frankly we're not providing the sort of service that the Isle of Wight was promised at the start of this contract. I'll be interested in the response of the cabinet member to what he seems to have inherited with regard to this contract and how he feels about that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brody. It didn't go unnoticed by myself that at this moment in time we are looking at a portal that refers to the previous administration. However, the new administration must at some point in time take responsibility.
A bit like the Johnson government still refers to the last Labour government, which of course, as we all know now, was 11 years ago. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Would the cabinet member like to comment on this, please?
Thank you, Chair. I want to make a comment and thank Councillor Brody for those comments and questions. And he's absolutely right. We are monitoring the contract and declaring it as being amber. But we, as a new administration, have inherited the cuts from the previous administration. And whilst we will be overseeing their delivery, it is of interest to our public what those cuts actually mean, because I'm not entirely sure that those cuts have been explained to our residents on this island what it means. And my email inbox really seems to indicate exactly that, because people are contacting me about grass that hasn't been cut, about weeds that are growing, and the answer that I'm having to give is that these are parts of cuts of the previous administration of this council as they agreed in their budget, and it does mean that the grass in some cases will not be cut. And I think it's interesting to our councillors, and it's important that our residents know that when the grass isn't cut, for example, it has been reduced in the scope of the contract to save money. And as long as our residents are aware of that and understand that, I think we will all be in a better place as a council to deliver and continue to deliver those cuts that were implemented certainly last year, 2019, 2020, and are ongoing, of course. They're not annual cuts, there are cuts every year for every succeeding year of this contract. So I do welcome Councillor Brody's questions and comments, and I can only concur with him. These are cuts to the scope of the service. They are savings, but they are cuts. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Well, of course, we look forward to when we get into budget time to see how the new administration wants to deal with such matters with interest. And I would point out, though, if there are any long grasses at dangerous points on roadways, they should be reported immediately to Iron Roads and they will cut them. So it's not a matter of... Councillor Jordan, do you want to say something about that?
Thank you, Chair. The point about the cuts is it's gone from an outcome delivery to an input delivery, so there are numbers of cuts per year. That's how the scope of the contract's been changed. So the grass is not cut because it's long, it will be cut because there are a number of cuts.
Yeah, but I have to add in that it's important is that if there's a safety issue and grass is growing so high on a junction, for instance, and you report that to Iron Roads, it would be dealt with. And it certainly would be in my book because I'll make sure of it. And I assume there'll be other people as well, but thank you for that. Members, any more comments or questions regarding on Shortcastle Road? You have another one. Councillor Lee.
Yes, I just want to raise one or two questions. I'll do them one at a time, if I may, about different parts of the performance. One, which is on page 17 in our report, I'm not sure exactly where it is in the cabinets, it's to do with the number of households with in temporary accommodation. And this was particularly has increased considerably compared to last year, well, because of COVID or the year before, within that. And I just really wanted to ask how it is envisaged that with sort of post-COVID, as we come out, because obviously there was further funds that were available regarding people in bed and breakfast, etc. Within that period. So I'd like to my question is, what is planned as we move out of COVID, and according to Mr. Johnson, it's going to be on the 19th, and we're all back in, and all the staff are back and move back into the other accounts, etc. So, how are we going to be tackling this issue, which, as I say, is quite considerably higher than it has been previously, and could be higher with the people that don't have protections from evictions and court cases, because there was an amnesty. So there's a lot of people that are in financial debt with rent arrears that could be coming in. So I've been quite interested how does the council with reviewing this and what's our intervention regarding it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good question, interesting question. Who was going to answer that question is the big question. Councillor Stevens.
New into office, I don't know if you can ever hear me. But I can assure you that moves are afoot within the homelessness department to counter the increase, and there will be an increase in homelessness, I'm afraid, once certain restrictions are lifted and taken forward. The empty properties officer is once again out there searching, but number of empty properties is dropping because not only at this present time, but at this current time, during your administration, Chairman, he was out there doing the same. So we've only got a certain amount of empty properties out there which we can actually go and acquire. But I can assure you that the administration that I'm in will move forward not only with seeking new builds, but looking at the empty properties and indeed affiliations with other partners.
Okay, thank you for that. Any more questions? Councillor Lilly.
Yes. I wish to raise about the issue of people on benefits and how this is increased or double increased during COVID. So we've gone up from about 2,500 to about 5,000. And again, how we, as a council, obviously working with other agencies like job centres, etc., are going to get our residents back into work.
Okay, good question. Obviously, COVID has a lot of cause and effect. Now, who's going to take that question? Is that Councillor Stevens?
Page 20, by the way.
Thank you, Michael. I don't need the page, I just need the solution, as we all do. As you can appreciate, it's a difficult task. There will be government funding coming down through to assist us, and hopefully we'll get a slice of that. But the Isle of Wight Council, regardless of what administration is here, will be always faced with the same problem. And the problems are that we don't get enough money to assist and support our homeless people, our people out of work, our people in danger of losing their job, etc. It's a balancing act that we've, as the Isle of Wight Council, across the chamber, knows only too well. We will continue to do that. We will continue to make headway, and we will support our people at challenging times in the most appropriate manner we can and to the fullest that we can.
Thank you. Also supplementary.
Yes, absolutely.
One of the things it says on page 20 is the Isle of Wight rate is increasing while the regional and national figures are remaining steady. Are we going to make representations to the government that we are a special case in the South East and need specific help in job creation?
I'm guessing the answer is yes, but Councillor Stevens.
You're speaking the word, I don't mind that. Of course, we will use every eventuality, all stakeholders and support to come together and provide a cohesive request to the powers that be. And it's not just the government and through our MP, but it's also elsewhere. There were, I don't like to say the old phrase, but I'm going to say it. We're in this together, and the only way we're going to pull through and make the island a better place for people at such pressing times is to make sure that we work together in a cohesive manner. And I'll take that forward through the outgo as well, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stevens. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And sometimes there are no differences between administrations. We would do precisely the same thing and indeed we would. Thank you.
I look forward to your support then with the current administration to go to the National Conservative government to argue the Isle of Wight case.
Of course, we on frequent occasions at Trial MP will always do such things, and we happen to talk to ministers regularly, so we'll do what we can. Councillor Brody.
Thank you, Chair. In the report of page 37 of the Councillor Stevens, the Community Safety and Digital Transformation portfolio, there's reference to ICT on the Council. I very recently read in the staff guide an article by the Chief Executive reporting complimentary remarks from the Municipal Journal Awards to the ICT team regarding the way in which the Fire and Rescue Service merger was achieved in terms of ICT, which is obviously something to be welcomed. What I'd like to ask Councillor Stevens is when we will see similar remarks regarding the Isle of Wight Council's website, which frankly is 20th century as opposed to 21st century, is inaccessible, is unintelligible to the vast majority of the people, unusable, and as I understand it, at least £250,000 has already been spent on updating this website, and we're no further forward. Perhaps Ian Stevens could give me some assurance that sometime during the administration of which he is a cabinet member, we might actually see a 21st century website that is accessible to the people of the Isle of Wight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brody. We're somewhat further forward than we were once upon a time, but much more to do, obviously. Councillor Stevens.
I'll be very brief then, Chair. All I'm going to say is that what is at this moment in time will drastically change into a more positive area. I can say to you that not only will the work be dealt with in a positive and engaging way, there will also be a quite vigorous scrutiny of what the spending is, where it's going and how it's going and what the impact is. As you know, Councillor Brody, I come with a little bit, and only a little bit of IT background, so I can look at it probably a little bit clearer than some others. But rest assured that we're moving from a place that is not acceptable and hope to arrive at a place that will be acceptable, not just to you and I, but to those people out there who are trying to engage with the Isle of Wight Council through the website. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Stevens. And perhaps we could look at accessibility in a sensory way as well. It's quite important for the website. Thank you. Notes. Councillor Evans.
With regard to the website, this week I have received two from the county to update and alter something, and I even thought that tonight's meeting was going to be from a different delivery, and I was anxious that I was being asked to do something for which I had not been primed. So I don't know whether it's a genuine web or not. When we had the change to the planning portal, there was a little bit of previous notification, and we've all settled into that one. But I'm a little bit anxious that we have the right setup, that we have the confidence that whatever webs are and pages are given us, that there is some way of proving that they are bona fide, because things that the mushrooming isn't coming up, it's sort of cascading down, and it could create quite a lot of anxiety over whether it's genuine or not. So I would hope that when they do put in any new webs, web pages, that they will do quite a bit of preparation, notification to all and sundry, not just council people. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes, and perhaps Councillor Stevens, this is something that you might be able to look into. I think what you're referring to is the update or change of something. We had an email recently where we had to make a change by the 1st of August, I think it was. I thought I'd get that out of the way straight away, attempted it, and it came up unavailable, whatever, error message, so I couldn't do it. I wrote back and asked for it to come again, still couldn't do it, so that needs looking at, Councillor Stevens.
Chairman, I think that within our corporate IT, I think there is an area for service improvement to members and officers with regards to airing faults, reporting faults and getting faults dealt with. And I think that's an area that I know the head of IT and his department are looking at, and I feel sure that as we progress, we won't be feeling that we're on our own dealing with our IT problems, but we will have the support of corporate IT.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Any more questions or comments? Members? See no takers. Councillor Brody.
Just a comment, really, Chair. Councillor Lilly and I could sit here all evening and snipe at the last administration And I hope that you understand that, but we're not going to do that. Because I don't think that's the nature of this administration. We're just giving you an example of how it could be, but we decided not to do it. That example. And I think that's the message that certainly the leader of the council drills into to me as much as anything, because nobody's more adversarial than me sometimes. You know, that we need to work together as a man that really. We haven't had that for 4 years, 4 years. We're far from it. And I hope that we are going to strive and move away from that in the next 4 years. You know, if I can do that, anybody on this council can do it. But if you don't do it, I'll just balance the rest of you. I'll take you on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. I couldn't agree more. There are 39 of us, not 9, so yes, we need to all work together and pull in the same direction. It's not for us, it's for residents of the island.
Just make a comment.
Absolutely, yes, you want to snipe, do you?
No, I don't want to snipe. I want us to actually bring together, because on the 19th of this month, we're opening up, and we as a community are faced with some huge issues on this island. Obviously the same as across the country, but we're responsible for the Isle of Wight, and we have got to actually, one, come to terms and live with COVID and how that, we've got a huge legacy of mental health issues and anxiety. We've got to bring back people into the workplace, right? This council on the 20th has got to bring all its staff back, or at least have a plan and strategy to do that. We have to be encouraging that, and we're getting our economy and getting the 5,500 of people on this island on benefits of that. So yes, we have a commitment to this community to actually start the work now and recover within that, and we've got to do that, and we've got to do that together. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And is there any further questions or comments? Then I will move on the agenda. We now come to items due to be considered by the Cabinet. There was something that I should show. Right, before we get into questions on the Cabinet papers, there were 2 urgent matters that came in my direction by email from the monitoring officer, and they were both for not to have my agreement, and I agreed wholeheartedly because they were urgent and needed dealing with. One was holiday activity and food, so I have that agreed, and the COVID grants for schools to fund food vouchers, which Councillor Andre has dealt with accordingly. Thank you. So we move on to items on the Cabinet papers. Shall I just sort of run through them and then you can see if there's any questions on each matter? We have the consultation on closure of 6th form at Harrisbrook College. Councillor Bray.
Chair, I think it's just a tidy up proposal, to be frank. There isn't a 6th form at Harrisbrook College. I think nominally it could take people on, but the students of the Harrisbrook College go to the 6th form college, which just happens to be led by the Taylor College, which is also in town. I think it's just a tidy up proposal, we should just know it.
Thank you for that. Yes, I think as far as I can see, it's a paper exercise. It's not been that way. It's been working a different way anyway. So, any other comments or questions from members? Councillor Bryce.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, my knee-jerk reaction at first was to look at this from a different angle. But going back to a few years ago when we were looking at that school, we knew that this would be coming. And that the provision is still going to be there. It's just not going to be there in name, really. Maybe that's something that can be looked at I'll perhaps be looking to some options on that with the cabinet level maybe. But I think ultimately it is a tidying up exercise, and I think that's what I've got to say at this stage.
Thank you for that. Yes, of course, it goes back a long way, that name, doesn't it? It's, I understood your immediate feelings over, I get it saying that. Members, any more questions or comments? We should move on to mobile home licensing fees policy. Any questions or comments on that? Councillor?
I hope that's all.
Not quite. Right hand side, there you are.
Can you just tell me is there no fees policy at the moment? Is this a brand new policy? Is that what we're discussing?
I believe it's an update on policy.
It's an update. Okay, so there is a standing policy at the moment. This is just an update.
That's correct, Chair. We have to, under the legislation, we have to bring this back annually for the councillors to review, so it's an existing policy.
Thank you.
Members, any further questions or comments on the policy for the licensing? Okay, we shall move on. School term dates. Sorry, go on.
Comment. You know, at the risk of intervening on every single item, I think there should at least be some form of outcome when you consider something for scrutiny committee. I would suggest that we should at least note reports, if not welcome them or oppose them or reject, discuss or anything like that, we should at least, because I know that Mr. Thistlewood produces a summary of meetings for cabinet in 2 years' time, and I think it should be recorded whether we took a view or not.
Yes, good point. Okay. Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, that's true. Okay, school term dates 2022 to 2023. Any questions from members? I see from the gallery there's a question from a member in the gallery. If you want to come forward, Councillor Quirk.
Thank you. The original term date consultation involved head teachers, parents, and a whole range of people. There were 1,877 responses, and 2/3 of them went for the option that was selected with the 2-week October half term. The letter that went out, it goes out every year to headmasters, was responded by 9 or 10. And of those, 4 or 5 indicated that they wanted to lose the 2 weeks in October. But it was the parents who actually supported that. And it seems inappropriate to make that sort of decision when you have such a dramatic response from parents without going back to a proper consultation. We had a bit of a Mickey Mouse consultation over the writings change where people were told that they could only comment on really limited things, and it was really just a questionnaire rather than a consultation. And we seem to have another one here that's just gone to head teachers, and then there's been a sort of supplementary nudge to head teachers to get a bit more of a response. And the biggest response seems to be that they actually want 2 weeks at Christmas, not that they want to get rid of the 2 weeks in October. I just think this is a decision that should be following a proper consultation, and that this administration is not actually doing this properly. And if you're going to change it, you should actually consult and seriously consult, and not just do a total gesture consultation. And I would encourage this committee to actually formally send that message back to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quirk. Would the Cabinet member like to make a comment accordingly, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Cabinet member, would indeed like to make a comment. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Chair, for getting back so quickly to actually give the rubber stamp for those fundings, because it was absolutely essential that we got that funding out to the providers so that they would be able to provide those facilities.
Important matters and they have to be done acted quickly, so no problems.
Thank you, very much appreciated. In terms of consultation, we have consulted, as Councillor Coyle said, there was an original consultation done. Because of the nature of this, I asked for a further consultation. Now, as a local authority, we consult with head teachers, and it's the head teachers in the schools that actually gauge the responses from parents. Now, we have a statutory requirement to actually plan for a certain number of days. So, as I'm sure members would appreciate, that taking those responses into account, there has to be some trade-off. So, what we've done, the 2-week October holiday has only actually been implemented once in 2019 because of obviously the COVID situation. I think it's important to make a point that as a local authority, we only have the say over those schools that come under the local authority, which is the voluntary schools and the voluntary schools and the schools that come under our authority, which is actually, I think it's a number of 21, 22 schools in total. I also took into account that parents may well have children at more than one school. And in making the decision I did, it would actually fall much more in line with other schools on the island. Now, in terms of the responses, as Councillor Clerk has quite rightly said, it was an overwhelming response that the highest priority amongst our teaching professionals was for 2 weeks at Christmas. In both the primary and the secondary schools, but especially in the primary schools, that winter term coming up to Christmas is a very busy time, and it was considered by the teachers that they would prefer to actually have 2 weeks of Christmas with 2 weekends either side, so a total of 3 weekends with 2 weeks in the middle. That was considered to be their priority. Now, if we had kept 2 weeks in October, that would have shortened the summer holiday to 5 weeks. So I have made my decision on what I think was the majority from the responses. But also, let's not forget that we have to put our island children as a priority in this, so I also make my decision on what I thought would actually be the best for educational outcomes. Thank you. I'm happy to take further questions.
Thank you for that. Members, Councillor Bryce.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I get what you're saying, Councillor Brown, I do, and I listen to what head teachers say, and I've been actively involved in a couple of schools, and totally respect the leadership's opinions from schools. The thing about this particular situation is that the Isle of Wight has a lot of parents that cannot take time off in regular school holidays, and that is a fact. Many parents cannot get a week off in summer holidays. They can't take time off at Whitsun, and often they can't take a substantial amount of time over Christmas. And what the consultation that was performed last time, targeted parents as much as it did the leadership of the school and the teaching staff. And the result of that consultation was that actually a lot of parents were asking for a week that was outdoors. Now, I appreciate that doesn't align with all schools, and that's the elephant in the room, really. But I do feel that there are a lot of parents that actually look at that week as a bit of a lifeline for getting some time off work to spend with their children while they're not at school. And actually their decision on where they send their children to may be based on that as well. Not everyone can afford to do things in the way that some of us maybe wouldn't ourselves. Some parents rely on that week as the only week that they can have off in the whole year and spend that time with their children. And I think it would be totally unfair not to go out and consult the public on this. So that is my view on it. And I would formally propose that we take that view. Thank you.
Second that. If you're looking for a seconder.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Mint.
Thank you. I'm going to agree completely on the second in this motion because, as a perfect example, in 2019 I took my children for our first holiday abroad for years because the summer is when the economy here is extraordinarily busy. People can't take time off work in the summer. So I would suggest to me not to take off Christmas, but to take off a long summer holidays. According to educationalists, our summer holidays are already too long. It actually creates some damage to the learning process of children. We shouldn't have 6 weeks holiday. It's an anachronism. We should have a shorter summer holiday. And for the sake of idle workers, I think 2 weeks should be valuable. That's my personal opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Mint. Councillor Bray.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I have a lot of sympathy with the last 3 speakers, to be honest. But I'm also quite surprised we're even having the discussion because, as I recall, and my memory's not as good as it used to be, there was a decision of a government many years ago, probably 20 years ago, the decisions about schools shouldn't be made in County Hall because of the political correctness that used to be exerted by both Conservative and Labour councils at the time. And the government at the time, it was probably a Conservative government, introduced local management of schools. They said head teachers knew their parents best. And it seems to me that a consultation was undertaken through head teachers here today. I don't think we should be getting involved in a consultation with parents. That's avoiding the major role that head teachers have within their school communities. They've come back with a response which I think we have to respect, unless we're in the business now of going back to what I think it was probably either Mr. Thatcher or Mr. Major said at the time, the tyranny of county halls around the country. Is that the sort of organisation we want here? I certainly don't want to. And certainly, in the primary school within the community that I represent, I got lots of complaints from residents at the fact that Christmas holiday in 2019, not so much the year just gone, in 2019, wasn't very long. It's a big time for children. It's also a key rest time for parents. So I will not support Councillor Price's proposal. I do think this is the right thing to do. And I would object, surprisingly given it was introduced by a Conservative government, I would object entirely to starting to interfere in the way schools manage themselves. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bray. Councillor Lilly and then Councillor Price.
Totally support Councillor Brody in this regard. I think we have to particularly at this time take notes that our head teachers have had to lead schools probably through the most difficult time that they've ever been faced with. I am a governor of a primary school, and just seeing the difficulty that the school has had to go through and the leadership of that, we do really, as Councillor Brody says, need to really respect that, especially at this particular time. It is very difficult to do these consultations, and I think we have to put in the context of where we are during COVID within that. And I also think a particular changing of 2 weeks in October for many parents, and I know at the school that I'm governing, but also schools that are in my ward, I have 2 in my ward, actually managing that time, particularly on low income, is extremely difficult. So I think that this is a very practical move. I think we can learn lessons about the future, but I would definitely support the recommendation that is being put forward in this report. And even though I have a lot of empathy with what Councillor Price is, I'm not voting in favour of the proposal. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. Welcome to Councillor Price. Just a comment from me, just briefly. The survey or consultation with schools, school heads, I assume, wasn't unanimous, I have to say. I'm looking at the figures, there was 8, 9, 14. So there were differences of opinion there, not unanimous. But now, Councillor Price.
Thank you for letting me come back again, Chair. I mean, I just want to reiterate that I absolutely do respect the view of the leaderships of the schools, because yes, I actually agree the head teachers do know best. But there is this issue in regards to an alternate week that's out of kilter with national school holidays. And it has probably been a benefit to a lot of people. That is why so many people chose it. And I just don't see, I cannot see why we can't go to public consultation in regards to consulting with parents. Of course, there's a lot of parents that their view may now have changed after they've had that 1 year with a shorter summer break and 2 autumn holidays. So actually, it may be a completely different result this time, but I still feel strongly that we should go out to public consultation. I don't disagree with anything that's been said. I think it's a debate that needs to be had, but I do think we need to go back again and ask the public one more time.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Yes, we have a Councillor Bacon wishes to speak.
If I may. Got a green light, does that mean it's working? I'll shout. Oh, thank you, Chair. You extended the courtesy of a word to a non-member of the committee just now, so I'm hoping you'll do that to me. We know why this debate is now being had. It goes back to a political argument a few years ago. I'm not going to reopen that. But I would just like to say, having gone through that process a few years ago, this should be about education and not holidays. Hence the importance of the views of teaching staff. And Councillor Brokey is quite right, and I agree with him, and Councillor Lilly. And I think Councillor Price talked about elephants in the room. There's one other. Why this all started, and what really needs to be revisited, is the fact that head teachers' discretion to grant time away from school was removed a few years ago. That's the actual problem here, and it's a bigger issue, and that's really what needs to be addressed if we're going to be having to have this sort of debate.
Okay, thank you for that. I would go back again to what I said a few minutes ago, and this was like it's not unanimous as a decision. There are varying opinions in school heads. Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair, for indulging me. Just on that very point, when you say it's not unanimous, my thinking was, as I said, there was a high priority. So if you look at the 3 different options that were put forward, 2 of them are actually proposing the 2 weeks at Christmas. So it's perfectly reasonable to actually combine those 2 responses in terms of the strong message that was coming through to me was that it was the 2 weeks at Christmas. So I think that puts a slightly different perspective on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's still a majority, not unanimous. And I know sometimes you get into authority by having a majority, but sometimes it's worth having a wider consultation as well, perhaps. Members, any further questions or comments? No. Well, therefore, we have a proposal from Councillor Price and seconded by Councillor Speak that this should go to wider consultation with parents, etc., etc. Have we got that? Have we got a wording for that?
That's correct, Chair. It will be a recommendation to the Cabinet.
Recommendations.
Yes. So I think it's time to go to a vote on that. Members, all those in favour of that proposal, raise your hands.
Raise clearly, please, Chairman. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And those against?
2.
That is carried. Thank you, members.
Reverse proportionality in action.
Well, there you go. Openness, transparency and democracy. Thank you, Councillor Brooke.
Wow.
Okay, moving on. We now move to the Pride Transport Interchange Project Group. Any comments, questions from members? Councillor Weston.
Thank you, Chairman. Observation for the right question. Encouraging to read that Right Hand Council, Right Business Association and the Right Region Working Group were involved in a series of face-to-face briefings. Encouraging to read that letters were sent to key stakeholder groups, including the link to the consultation document. But we seem to have missed our key income generators, if you like, and that's our private visitors. So just to give some context, let's put that into context. So Whitelink Right Passenger Service at the Pierhead, that accommodates around about 1.2 million foot passengers every year. If you spread that across an average of 12 months, you're talking about 100,000 visitors in and out of here. During the weeks of June, July, and the 3 days in August, consulting active travellers would have been a really good way to see views on the new proposals. I really do think there was a trick there. So, the ending question is, was this option ever considered?
Shall I answer that, Chair?
Councillor, yes, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The very quick answer to that is I can't tell you because it was your administration that brought this forward, this grant funding, and we weren't around this administration to know what you did. Clearly, the consultation wasn't very good across the whole scheme. So I can't answer you whether you considered it or not, Councillor Besson. I'm really sorry. Perhaps you can tell me.
Thank you for that, Councillor Besson.
I'm able to do that, Councillor.
Yes, yeah.
So the report going to the Cabinet, mixed emotions there, if you like. We have a kiosk and toilet block to be demolished. If I was a property owner, I'll be looking to generate as much income on my properties up as I really could. So the loss of the concession toilet removes X amount of pounds from the council costs each year. So just a general question, and looking at the plan, I know that we're reading into the plan detail. Could there be a consideration for the concession to be replaced elsewhere? That's one consideration. We've got 2 areas of tree planting with public benches, one that's parallel to level to the pier entrance, and then another area down to the site called proposed footpath. Replacement of 1 or 2, or even consideration of even 3 concessions. So it's like an option on that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I've got this right, we have the toilets, the cafe and the public space. The toilets, of course, are owned by, at least by Rytown Council, of course, who upkeep them each year. I think it's about 20,000 a year. So the Isle of Wight Council are not involved with that. The cafe, the toilets, by the way, are being transferred into the railway station and upgraded to include disabled access. The cafe block, the cafe, which is part of that block that you referred to, is being removed under the scheme, if the scheme goes ahead. There are improvements and extension within the station to concessions to extend the space of the concessions to 3 on top. But anyway, that's to be decided, but a number of new concessions. I can advise you that alternatives are being looked at elsewhere on Ryde Seafront. That includes Western Garden itself and further along the Esplanade. And the public space area, of course, is very, very much part of the public consultation, hasn't been fixed and decided, and could become what the public wanted to become in principle. In terms of the finishing, the greenery, the tree, the tables and the chairs.
Thank you for that. Okay, very happy with that. Just one question about the toilets are going to shift to inside the railway station. Will they still be fully accessible for all times, for instance, that Whiteley running? With that.
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely can confirm that they're public, full public access. The arrangements at the current time are that Whiteley would open and close those toilets. At the current time, they aren't open 24 hours. Rytown Council closes them in the evening and opens them in the morning. I can't tell you if I was talking, it's about 8 till 8 or something like that at the current time. The arrangement and suggestion is that Whiteley would open up on the first fast cab and they would close after the last fast cab. That's the kind of discussion and arrangements that are being considered.
Excellent, thank you for that. Just one thing, because I noticed in the gallery we have Councillor Ian Ward, who was responsible for bringing this scheme forward, as you rightly pointed out in the first place. So I think it's an excellent scheme, and the amount of money involved there, and it's great that we've got it going forward. However, little niggling things we just need to sort out. Councillor Price.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's probably difficult for me to have an opinion on this because it's in a town that I don't represent, but obviously this is a significant proposal. It's a huge project. It's going to cost a lot of money. And it needs to be right. It needs to be the right scheme. I appreciate you guys, it's all done ready to go. It's not something that you've had much influence over. I hasten to add, nor did I. But when it comes to Newport, I stood shoulder to shoulder with a couple of other non-Conservative members against the St Mary scheme. And it wasn't because we didn't want a scheme there, we just didn't like the scheme. We didn't want it to be done before other schemes, and we wanted the priorities to be different. We didn't get what we want, it's very difficult. It would be very difficult for me to sit here now and say this administration must do another consultation on this or something, when we didn't, I'm afraid, on St Mary's Junction. And I was very vocal on that, and there's lots of things in the press at the moment saying St Mary's Junction works beautifully, so we should all be very happy with it and everything else. And that's going to be the same down at Ryde Interchange. But of course, we don't know if it will be right, do we? I'm sure it will be. I'm sure it will work beautifully. But the loss of the public space and the loss of the concession is a big concern. What is it going to look like down there? We can't really see, can we? Is it going to look very nice? Hopefully it will, when the landscaping is done and the trees are back here and stuff. But ultimately, you don't know until it's done and it's finished and it's working whether it will work. I think the improvements of the pier and the tramway will be fantastic. I will go back to St Mary's again. and say that, you know, while there's elements of it that work beautifully, coming from council, you to council, fantastic. Forest Road, you can be sat there for half an hour now and you work before. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor President. This speaks a voice that was speaking quite loudly one time against scrutiny every square, so we'll paper over that one for now. Thank you. Councillor Jordan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Price. I respect your openness and honesty. It's refreshing to hear. If I might just correct one misapprehension, there is no loss of public space. There's an increase of about 8,000 square metres in total of public access area. Some of that would be walkways, admittedly, but it's an increase of public area. And I guess I should add to that in fact, part of the aspiration of the plan was to not only make bus travel sustainable and attractive, but it was to reduce the dependency on single vehicle use and increase the offer to pedestrians. And the extra space actually does lend itself towards that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lilly.
As a Ryde resident and obviously a Ryde councillor, I have a particular interest with this because this is extremely important. It's important to our work, it's very important to Ryde and its economy. And I think one of the things is that there was considerable amount of time to come back to the community and consult, and it wasn't. And the current administration had to pick up the baton and suddenly get that limited amount of time. And bodies like my town council were not fully consulted, and we're now given, you know, a gun to our head, which nobody likes. And that's why you start to get disgruntlement in the community and petitions start and everything. And that could have been presented. The other particular thing, and one of the things I would put forward in a moment in the proposal to Cabinet, is that the drawings and the way it was presented was first year university kind of degree. It's poor. If you are going to do something like this, you need to have the officers with visualisations, with pictures that people can interact and see. And one of the real difficulties for the community and businesses is to get that visualisation of what it looks like. There's also not been a solid bringing together two stakeholders with Whitelink, the railway, the bus. That is all in the memorandum, in the Ryde Place plan, which was agreed between Isle of Wight Council and Ryde Town Council, but hasn't been led by Isle of Wight Council to implement it, particularly developing relationships with those operators, which clearly says in the Ryde Place plan that there should be a coming together of the key stakeholders with the travel operators within that. Ryde Town Council did that informally last year to do with bringing the CAC back and bringing back our economy after lockdown, or the first lockdown. But that again should have been led by officers that were developing this scheme. It's been divide and rule, and that is why our community reacted in such a way, because they haven't got things which they can really grapple with. I think the important thing, and I would ask two questions of the Cabinet member. One is that we can build in flexibility of consultation over a period of time so that people can see drawings, they can move park benches around, they can look and develop. And the whole area of Western Gardens could really be developed with bandstands, statues, and become a real focal point. And I think it's very important. One of the reasons why the toilets and the cafe, and of course the cafe owner is a previous member of your administration within that now campaigning to save his cafe, but he will get compensation or get that move from that, was that when you come down the pier, you cannot see Union Street. So what happens to the hundreds of thousands of people that actually come is they end up getting on a bus or a train and going out and not actually contributing to White's economy because they can't see Union Street. When that goes, they'll be able to walk down the tramway rebuilt and be able to see Union Street, and then we'll link with the Has, historic High Street, and people will move into the town. And if Councillor Brody gets away, we'll have a brand new Dotto train that will also take people around the town and build on our economy. Of that. Thank you.
Somebody had to mention the Dotto train. Thank you,
Yes, how did you know that?
I'm sure you will. Well, thank you for that. And I obviously had a councillor who knows his ward very well and the community and so on. So, yeah, thank you. Interesting. Councillor Jordan, some of the things that Councillor mentioned, would you be taking these on board and there's right consultation and so on?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Absolutely, the public consultation is part of that process, current consultation. It's part of that process to understand how we can best deliver the scheme in its entirety in terms of public realm at least. I would just add that the scheme came with timeframes and conditions, and I think there are some lessons to be learned on consultation. I think Councillor is correct when he said that Right Council weren't consulted. They weren't. I'm a member of Right Council. We weren't consulted very, very effectively or at all. The Right Regen Group, which I also sat on, did have a walkabout some years ago, 2 years ago from memory. And one of the recommendations that that group put forward to the Isle of Wight Council was that the toilet block, this is reverse of what Councillor said, the toilet block and the cafe were actually a hindrance to the vista from our town and from Union Street, and that actually the image of the town as people arrive would be better served by no building there. So in a sense, there are other solutions that may not be part of this scheme to replace that facility of a cafe elsewhere. There may be, and discussions are being had already about that. I think the toilet is not a loss, it will be moved into the station in full access. But I think Councillor is absolutely right. We probably could have delivered consultation a fair bit better than was delivered on this scheme. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Just a point and then a further question. One is the toilet, removing the toilet, we'll be able to work with White Link and other stakeholders to get a changing room. Newport has a number of changing rooms which make absolutely essential for accessibility and for people with disabilities within our community. And we don't have one in Ryde. We don't have one. And there isn't the space where the existing toilets put one. But there will be in the station, and that will open up to visitors that need that facility, because families come, I mean, that is not in line what we need that in mind. This actually gets that, particularly in the central place.
Yes, I noted that in the report myself, and I thought it was a really good thing that it's happened.
Yeah. So my question is, many residents have, been saying, a significant minority of residents, right, have been sort of saying we shouldn't do it and we should refuse the money, right? And I want to put to Councillor Jordan and say, and to the leader of the council, what would happen if we refused the grant because people didn't like it or there was a plan? What would happen to this island and to that and future investment? And what would happen? I'd like to know the answer.
Interesting question, but I can't imagine anybody would turn down such a grant for such an improvement anyway. Who's going to answer? Councillor Jordan, you want to take that one?
Thank you, Chair, again. It's a good portfolio, this. Tough questions, but I think the answer is something like, firstly, it's a partnership bid with Portsmouth, so it's not just 10 million, it's about 56 million. The impact of that, I don't know, but I suspect it will be very difficult if we were to refuse to accept the 10 million for Portsmouth to go ahead, but I'd be corrected on that. In terms of our 10 million, let's talk about the island's 10 million. It's 3 schemes, it's Whitelink, it's South Western Railways and it's Isle of Wight Council. We can't pick and choose, it's going to be one or none in terms of the entire scheme. And so the answer, I guess, Councillor Lee, is that if we were to refuse this grant funding after we applied for it in the first place and were granted it, on the third go, this would be the third time that we gave the grant back for work on Ryde Seafront. If we were to do that, the reputational damage on this council would be enormous. I think the impact on grant funding, and there are other grant fundings into the Department of Transport as we speak, I think would be very, very damaging indeed. And I think the impact and reputational damage on our partnerships with Whitelink and with South Western Railways would also be damaged. I think this would be a damaging move to this island and to the town of Ryde if we were to refuse this grant funding. Thank you, Chair.
I tend to agree with you, and I have to say, as somebody who was involved in the Portsmouth side with the bus station improvement there, and I have to say, anybody who's travelled across there and used that service is fantastic, and it's made such a difference, and I think it's a good say here. And I'm sure the Chief Executive will want to say something about them back.
Thank you, Chairman. If I may, I think probably what is a really important point is that successive governments of various issues have always made it very clear that they want to do business with councils that deliver, and they have more conversations with councils that deliver. So if at any time we start to get cold feet that we're a council that can't deliver our aspirations or deliver what we say we're going to do, then that's going to damage any further conversations that we want to have or hope to have with government. So I think it's important, and as I say, it doesn't matter which government, the hue of the governments have always been very consistent. They will work very closely with councils that can be aligned to deliver.
Thank you for that. Councillor Miller.
Just a quick comment. I can't imagine anything worse for Ryde than refusing this grant. Because I remember, must have been about 2003-04, looking at a nice model of the new interchange, new railway station, and being built also. And you look at it, it's dreadful. The whole area looks awful. It's an appalling entry point for tourists into this island. As an entry point, it really looks ghastly, tired, desperately in need of renovation, and I'm pleased with the way go ahead. This to me seems like very, very bad. We've had consultation for 20 years now, in one form or another. I think, as Councillor George just suggested, the economic consultation has been learned, being built in to the plans. I think it's unfortunately the current consultation for this scheme has not been done well. This is quite clear from the public reaction. But for God's sake, let's please embrace this fantastic opportunity to bring Clyde up to date.
Thank you. Councillor Gray.
Yeah, it's also like Councillor Price and you brought a councillor sat here listening with horror to everything that you described. I haven't paid much attention to this at all. And one thing I will say, it is an absolute pleasure to be a member of this council with Phil Jones and portfolio there for everything to do with transport and infrastructure. It's an absolute pleasure because he's so clear in everything he explains. He's already on the top of his brief, and frankly, it's a breath of fresh air after the last few years. Now, I don't like to say that because I've got a lot of time for his predecessor, but frankly, it's been a total mess up. But the Chief Executive and Phil are entirely correct that if we reject this money this time, we're just going to look absolutely ridiculous. We have to take this money. The consultation has been entirely failed people abroad, failed people at the island. But we've got what we've got here. We need to move this forward. It's we're all, I don't know like what we end up with, but that's what we've got. And it's almost saying, campaigning for an island deal and eventually getting it some miracle. If John Snow get around and said, actually, we don't need it. That's the equivalent to me of what you would do if you're rejecting this. So I think we have to go ahead. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Yes, Councillor,
I wish to put a proposal forward that we support the report and support this council in going forward with this project. But we would, with one or two caveats. One, that officers on this scheme build bridges between all the stakeholders so they're actually working together. And two, they work closely with Rye Town Council, who's on the ground, to actually do ongoing consultations with the community and organisational businesses so that easy things can be tweaked. Perhaps moving where the taxis are, because once you see it, different. Perhaps looking at the cosmetics of improving Western Gardens, so that it doesn't stop, that the officers have to work in a consultative way with the community. Okay, that's my proposal.
I'll second that. Thank you for that. Okay, that makes sense. Members, any other questions, comments? Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just go back to should we say no to this money? Of course not. It would be absolutely outrageous to do such a thing. And the same thing, money for the Newport traffic improvements. We should never have said no to that money. But again, I have to go back to the fact that sometimes money can be spent better, or it could be prioritised in a different way. This is a bit different. It's one big scheme. In Newport, it's a number of schemes, and obviously there's something that may not be able to be delivered now because there won't be enough money left. And I think it would be very important to look at in the future. I don't know how we do this, but when these huge sums of money are being obtained from government, that maybe members get a bit more input earlier by a process that Councillor Lilly suggested. But also, let's just indulge me for 30 seconds. Newport, the money that we got should have been spent on this bridge. It would have solved so much. What the solution is, who knows? Maybe put the Mary's Junction over Crockett Bridge was the answer. Maybe that was the answer. But certainly, the public are scratching their heads still now as to why, and we know the reasons why, but the public certainly do not understand why so much money has been spent at St Mary's, and now the traffic gets through there beautifully quick, and and organise the Commons Bridge, along with the traffic on Staplers, and along with the traffic on South Street, and along with the traffic that's going to be on St George's Way, and the traffic on Staplers that me and Councillor Brody endure, our residents have to put up with all the time. So, you know, let's keep applying for money, let's just make sure that maybe members get as much input into understanding what's needed in the communities that they represent so well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. It's going slightly off into another scheme there, but to concentrate on this scheme, we have a proposal. Any other questions or comments? We have a proposal from Councillor Lilly, which have you got that in words there?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that the committee wants to support the recommendations within the report to enable the scheme to progress, but there should be more effective engagement with all stakeholders, including by county council.
Does that sound about right, Councillor? Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Brody, as we believe. Okay, then we shall take a vote. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. Unanimous decision. Thank you very much for that. Okay, moving on our agenda, we now have 16 Transport Policy Statement. Anybody got any thoughts, comments, questions? I see no hands. Okay, we'll just note Noted. Okay, quarterly performance we've dealt with. Draft Island Plan Strategy Consultation. Members. I'm going to start with Councillor Swindler because he's been chomping to say something.
Thank you, Chairman. When I joined, it wasn't very long ago, the Corporate Scrutiny Committee, I thought that what I would be doing would be scrutinising policy and decisions. And I thought that I would have an opportunity of doing that before things went out to public consultation. Now I do, and this isn't hollow words, I do commend the current administration for the speed with which they put forward the draft island plan. But I don't think as a matter of principle it is right that if such an important matter should go to public consultation before the Scrutiny Committee has had a proper chance of recommending amendments and possible other ways of approaching the matter. If one looks at our agenda, paragraph 5, what we're supposed to be doing today is, where appropriate, make comments or recommendations that the committee should be considered prior to the Cabinet making a decision. Now, the draft island plan is, give or take, 200 pages. I think I read fairly quickly, and I've spent an entire day reading it. And I've got a whole list of things that I believe, and I'm not taking a political stand here, there's been a lot of talk about coming together and what the previous administration may or may not have done. I wasn't part of the previous administration. And whilst there is a feeling, I think, amongst some of the current administration, as it were, that all Conservative policies are dreadful, I agree that some are, but not all. And I simply want to try and do my best for the island. The reason I came in to local government was because of the mess, in my opinion, of planning and the risk, in my opinion, of destroying what we hold very dear in our island. And I would like, and I hope the rest of the committee would like, an opportunity to look at this plan properly before it goes out to public consultation. And one of the reasons for that is, firstly, what I said, and it's important that we do our job. Secondly, there will be a lot of very angry people, I can tell you, in the West Point, which I represent in large part, with some of the proposals in this draft plan. And I would like the current administration to allow me to properly voice those opinions before we go out to consultation. And I've not had time, and I suspect that there's very few people on this committee who've had time properly to consider this draft plan. And that would be, in my view, an abdication of our responsibility to vote that it goes, or to not ask, as it were, should I say not vote, but to ask that there be further time for us to consider it. Bearing in mind that this will shape the lives of islanders in terms of their environment, in terms of their housing, in terms of their open spaces for the next 15 years. And in my view, and I'd like to put a motion forward which people can discuss, my view is that this committee should request the Cabinet at its meeting on Thursday to adjourn this matter to allow the Scrutiny Committee to undertake its duty.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Midland and then Councillor Lewis.
That's useful that I follow Councillor Smith, because I actually very much agree with what he just said. I do want to commend Councillor Fuller, because I can appreciate exactly what he's trying to do. Well, while we have no island plan in place, we're actually negative, we're only relying on the national planning policy framework. So we need to have an island plan in place as soon as possible. However, like you, I've read some of the sections and some of the ideas about the West White, and I cannot believe, because they, I can't believe what the West White becoming the fourth largest area of housing, how that fits in with any of our other priorities. I mean, it's just, I know those are just the agreed sites, it's not all of the houses that will be built, but it's just so completely out of kilter with what we've always been discussing for the last 20 years. It's always going to be Ride, the Deep Valley, and the Bay. And the Bay is now destined to build less houses than West White, and West White is our greatest landscape asset. It's our greatest economic asset. We can't just underfly West White. It's like cutting your own face, really. There's so I've got exactly the same worries as Councillor Speak, and I think I wish I could have seen this earlier. And I'd just like to ask Councillor what the process is now of how we make those kind of amendments to the draft plan.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Speak, for your work and the effort that you put into the questions that you've asked. Thank you, Councillor Medlin, also. I think this is the first stage. All right, we've already had consultation. I think that's the last consultation we had previously on the island plan, where it was suggested that we had 1,045 at one stage, new properties built every year, absolutely made people's hair fall out. It was dreadful. I think one of the things that we wanted to do was we also wanted to sort this out. We wanted to go out to consultation, and we wanted to ask our residents what their thoughts on the plans are. There are things in the draft plan that will be of concern to residents. There's things within the plan that are of concern to me as well. But what is important is that we meaningfully engage with our local community. That never happened last time. The engagement was very, very poor. And one of the things that I promised to do is to make sure that consultation is robust, is effective, and it's meaningful, and it involves the communities that will be affected potentially. So I would like to go out. I think one of the issues that we have is we can keep on stalling, we can keep on delaying this. But one of the issues that we're going to have later on in this year is the government's housing bill that is going to be thrust upon us. That could mean a lot of things. It could mean fewer houses, but chances are it could mean more houses, and that could have a significant input on the island. There are still people that aren't happy with the 486 figure per year, which is being proposed. It's lower than it has been. The reason that number has been reached at is because of what development we have allowed over 15-year periods for a great deal of years. Before austerity hit in 2007, we were building quite a lot of homes. It was only since 2007 that the housing market has slipped by the wayside. Now that may increase, and certainly it is government's wishes. If we hear what government is saying about building in the future, it's something that worries me. And to not have a plan in place to be able to fight those challenges that come before us is worrying, I think, for the whole of the island. And I think the sooner we can get on with this consultation, the better. This isn't the last stage in the consultation. There will be another consultation in February after we get feedback back from residents. So what I want to do is I want to go out speaking to communities, find out where the issues are, and where we can amend the plan appropriately, and then we can come back later on. This isn't the final plan. This is a consultation to get us on the way. And while we're in that stage, it then empowers us to have more of a say on current planning applications, which is of concern to a lot of residents across this island. We're seeing quite a lot of developments coming through the pipeline now. Let's have something to fight it with, and with this strategy we have that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bullock. Councillor Speaker, can you just turn your microphone to off? Thank you. Councillor Lee, then Councillor Price, and Councillor Bacon wishes to come in there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Before I just make the points on that, I do want to point out that the relevant committee to discuss the island plan is the Policy and Scrutiny Committee for Neighbourhoods and Regeneration. And I presume that the island plan comes to their work plan, and that will be the time, because this is Corporate Scrutiny Committee, which is looking overall. That's why we have other committees to dig deep and actually, could set up the kind of working party that perhaps councils think would be to go into the kind of detail. There's nothing stopping us from doing that at the same time we do the consultation, because we need to get out and engage with the town and parish councils and the community, because they have not been engaged in the past, and the detail they have. My particular points are that we are naked. I think you Councillor Midlands of that. We are totally exposed. Our planning is in special measures, right? We don't, in a sense, have a plan. The plan is out of date that we have, and we are subject to defaults by the National Planning Policy Framework, right? And that means the developers can really do what they like, and they can actually take over and put applications totally inappropriate on greenfield sites. And as Chair of Planning, and Councillor Brody as Vice Chair of Planning, we are faced with a huge increase of applications that were done through COVID by developers who actually want to pull the wool over our eyes and actually get, applications in before we have a plan. They don't want us to have a plan. They want to get in before that. And we have got to get a plan moving, Councillor Spring, so that we can get to a point where we can actually say that the planning committee can start to refuse inappropriate applications, because there is what you can do under the National Policy Framework is say that this will create a precedent against our plan. Now, the longer we push that out, we are in danger, because even if we refuse, it will go to appeal, and very likely we could lose, that appeal. And once that precedence was actually created, it doesn't matter what the plan actually says. The other point that very well from Councillor Fuller, who knows his brief extremely well, is the fact that we have got, obviously, the planning bill coming through, which can open it even more. And it clearly says in that if you have not got a plan, right, you're broke, right, within that. And so we have got to get this forward as quick as possible. We need to consult with the communities and the parish councils and we're not to do. At the same time, I respect Councillor Spink in saying that we as councillors really need to also go through the consultation and really work on this document so that we do get the balance right. I'm on the east, and I respect that you have on the west a beautiful island and protected by the A&B. But I'm worried on the east that we end up actually having a huge amount of housing and lose the green space. We have a deficit of green space in Rye, and we're faced with a number of applications that will increase that deficit, right? We have some of the poorest communities, the same in Newport, who can't even afford to get to the West Way to actually enjoy the beauty of this island. So we've got to get the balance right within that, and there's going to be some tough discussions and tough compromises. But let's start doing it and not whiffle waffle about. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, I've got Councillor Price, then I have Councillor Bacon, Julie Jones-Evans, and Councillor Brody.
Thank you, Chair. I totally agree with what Councillor Spink said. I know his passion for getting this right comes from the right place, and I fully appreciate that there is time needed to get this right. But unfortunately, those of us that have been on planning the last few years know that we are on borrowed time. We're in a really difficult position. If I ever hear those words uttered again, which I know I'm going to repeatedly presumption in favour of, it's a dangerous phrase that anyone on the planning committee hears. It's a dangerous phrase that planning officers don't want to hear. And it's a dangerous phrase for green spaces and land that we really don't want to see built on. I think delivering an island plan, an updated island plan, as soon as possible is the only way to stop a lot of inappropriate development. Should that be the end game? No, it shouldn't be. It should be something, maybe it needs to be an interim island plan. Maybe it needs to be an island plan that is updated every 2 years. Maybe it's something that needs to be updated regular enough to move with the times and allow us to deliver the housing we need while protecting the beauty of our island. So I can't say I'm in favour of delaying it. I think we've had too much of that. I think we need to move on. And Councillor Fuller absolutely is on top of his brief, and I fully respect that and commend him for getting this here so quickly and trying to move it on. I don't want to not support it, but I also want to make sure we get the best out of it I can. So I just wonder what Councillor Fuller could say in regards to how we can maybe look at reviewing it in the future, and whether this could be an interim solution that is delivered quite quickly, and then Councillor Spink's approach could feed into a second review. But let's get something in place as soon as we can. It's the only way. In fact, let's be honest, developers, agents, architects, they want an island plan that they can work to as well. They don't want to be using rules that are outside of the island plan. They actually want to know what the rules are, and then they can work with them. And that will help developers bring forward the right projects. And that is what we don't have at the moment.
Yes, thank you for that. Yes, you're right, and developers do that. I've been speaking to some agents recently who have fed some information and questions to me that will fit into our work plan when we start getting into development and housing and so on. Interim plan, Councillor Fuller.
I think one of the things we look at with this island plan is every 5 years it gets renewed anyway, as a matter of course. What we're going to try to do, what I'm hoping we're going to do in the next couple of months, if I'm allowed to do that, is go out and properly engage with our community
get the evidence from them. Because at the end of the day, if we're going to be challenging some of the things we don't like in this plan, we need to have the evidence to be able to do that. The sooner we get that evidence, the stronger our case is to be able to fight any of the concerns that Councillor Spink and many of the other councillors have. So one of the things that I want to try and do is make sure that that dialogue keeps open. I think the relevant scrutiny committee is the right way forward as well, and I would expect them to look at the evidence that comes back from the feedback. I would expect them to listen to what agents and applicants are saying. I would expect them to listen to town and parish councils, because town and parish councils at the end of the day, they're not the same as they were 10 years ago. Our town and parish councils are our voice within our community. They do so much work for us. I want to embrace what the town and parish councils say, and I want to make sure that they feel very much part of this plan. This plan is for the Isle of Wight people. It's not for developers. It's not for the regeneration. It's for the whole of our Isle of Wight community. And I want every single person that lives on this island, every single person that works within this island to feel proud of the work that we're doing now. We need to get that right. And I think to go out to engagement now is the right time to do it. We've extended the engagement period, so rather than having statutory six weeks, that's not long enough. We're going to go and do the 9-week period, because it is so important to make sure we get that feedback and we can feed that into the documents. And where the plan isn't quite right, we can make the appropriate amendments with the work of our town and parish councillors, with Councillor Spink, and with the other members that are interested in planning, to be able to change things. And that is really, really passionate for me. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and thank you for your passion. I'm going to skip Councillors Baker and Andrew Jones just for a minute and go to Councillor Rowley as he's part of the committee and to say something.
Yeah, I was going to protest, Chair, actually, but you realised that I was
preempted your protest.
Just a few comments. Firstly, the leader of the previous administration, now Mr. Stewart of Knighton, always used to say, we make decisions, we don't keep putting things off. And I certainly don't want to see this put off. The presumption of development is hanging around the necks of the local planning authority, and I think that both for us to be applauded on bringing this forward. It's been messing around for 4 years, at the very least, that I recall, and I think he's to be applauded for bringing this forward now. I speak again, as you all know, as a Newport member, and as ever, the majority of houses in my quick scan of it, I'm not speed reader yet, but I've absorbed most of the content, are in Newport and Carisbrooke. What a surprise. There's going to be some sort of megalopolis by the time a couple of island plans are out of the way. But setting that aside, in terms of scrutiny of this, to refer it to one of our policy and scrutiny committees, well, frankly, that's outside even the deadline for the proposed consultation that Paul's recommending. The next meeting of the Policy and Scrutiny Committee for Neighbourhoods and Regenerations is on the 21st of October, because we meet 4 times a year, so there's no point in asking them to look at anything. What I suggest we do is that we support the proposal that's going to Cabinet on Thursday to open the consultation up until the 30th of September. However, in the meantime, in the absence of a Policy and Scrutiny Committee within that time scale, it does have the ability of the Corporate Scrutiny Committee to establish a task and finish group. A task and finish group could be established, which Councillor Spink could of course be a member of. It could invite a membership of this committee and the Policy Committee and Scrutiny Committee for Neighbourhoods and Regeneration to do some work on this, to feed into the next meeting of the Corporate Scrutiny Committee in mid-September, which would then make a submission as part of the consultation, which I think would probably be appropriate. That doesn't address the fact that Councillor Spink clearly has issues with what's in the draft, but at least it would be feeding something into it. So I had formally proposed that we do establish a task and finish group, that obviously any member of this committee or Karen Lucione's Policy and Scrutiny Committee
can volunteer to participate in. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Broder. That's exceedingly sensible. And seconded by Councillor King. Right. Before we deal with that further, I'm going to go to the Chief Executive who wants to say something, and then Councillor Bacon and Duke Conservative would like to speak.
So, Chair, I think it's probably if I could have your Councillor Duke Conservative.
Okay, yes, that's fine. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Bacon.
Thank you, Chair. I think some of what I want to say is being said, but I think it's important enough to underline it. I think we should particularly note the passion with which Councillor Fuller has spoken this evening. He has an utter drive to get this sorted and get this right, but getting it out there is a key part of that. Councillor Spink says Scrutiny should have a look at it first, as has been noted by others. This has been behind the scenes too long. He has a lot of issues with it, and a lot of us do, but why can't they be part of public consultation? Or as Councillor Brodie wisely says, and suggested, a task and finish group to run alongside the public consultation. The thing is, it's a draft. It's not about trying to get it absolutely right and then issuing a finished document to the public. Certainly not at this stage. That, frankly, would show little respect to our residents if we were doing that. We want to listen to them and hear what they want to say and have them contribute. There's certainly things I'm not happy about with the document. I think part of where we are with this process is that people have become, I'm not saying this is a bad thing anyway, but people have become obsessed with the housing number. And very often there's almost a tunnel vision about that. Whereas there are many, many other important things to be considered. Where those houses are, obviously, what sort of housing, but also, from my perspective, in my brief, what environment those houses are within. And so I think we slightly suffer at the moment from some of those issues being forgotten. I think opening this up to the public will cure that. I particularly noted the question that was asked at the beginning of this meeting, which noted the near absence of mention of the biosphere in the document. That's something that really troubles me. I've spoken to Paul about it. The recognition and support for the biosphere and its aims should be key to this council. It's potentially transformational. As our quarterly performance report showed, page 83, support and enhancement of the biosphere is a key aim. One of those ways of getting that support and enhancement is going to be through this island plan. I'm going to make sure with Paul that the biosphere, you'll get sick of the biosphere reading through the plan. It's going to be on every page of plan, by the way. So we know we've got a problem, we know we have to deal with it, we know the document is not perfect, but what we need, the answer to this, is an immediate public conversation. We need to get this out to everyone, not to let a choice few can pore over it in private rooms. And that delay has been stated could put us further at risk. We're enough risk in planning at the moment as it is. So I'm glad to hear the comments of the committee wanting to get this out, get that consultation heard, and when councils, whether it be Council Spink or any of us, have issues, we can deal with that as part of the process and not hold up what is an essential and necessary process.
Thank you for that. And interestingly, the conversations I was having just this week with planning development agents, that was pretty much what I was saying to them as well about the inclusions and the housing numbers not necessarily being a crucial factor, but the numbers would kind of sort themselves out if we sort out the housing we need and where we need it and the type we need. Thank you. Councillor Jones, sorry for your long wait, but your turn.
Thank you. And it's, I come to Scrutiny to listen to obviously what all the members and other people present have to say. And I listened with interest to Councillor Spink, what he said. But we can't delay with this. And this has to be a whole island conversation. It's the island plan. We have to hear from the whole island. We can't delay, as Councillor Rose said, it's been 4 years. I think it's 2 years, 3 years since we had the last draft island plan, and we've fed into that, and that has resulted in some changes. There's lots of things that don't like it. As Councillor said, Newport is bearing a brunt of the new housing developments, and as is right. What we'll do through the Community Council, we'll engage meaningfully with our residents and use all of our resources, all of our newsletters and things in the press to get the message out there. And that's what we can do as councillors. I mean, it's great that councillors sitting together in the room and having a chat and discussing this, that, and the other, but is that, that's just what we think, isn't it? And, we represent each of us about 3,000 people each, so we need to get that message out to people and get the messages back from them loud and clear. But just from we hear a lot about we're held to ransom at the minute, we don't have an island plan by developers, but the flip side of that is this island plan will allow us to set our stall out, to say to investors, look, this is where we want you to build houses, this is where we want you to put new business units. It's very clear, and then that gives investors confidence that then they're going through an open door, that's already being discussed and passed through council and gone through consultation. It makes their life a lot easier. You're pushing out an open door rather than trying to work, as the situation in a minute, work against what we want as a community. So from a regeneration point of view, we can't afford to delay any longer. We really must get on. And I thank Council for all the work. He's worked really hard over these last few weeks to get us to this line with obviously the team at planning. And having 9 weeks to be able to consult properly, I think is the right way forward. So I thank you for that.
Thank you for that. Yes, and I agree that Newport Community Council are very good at getting surveys out, getting information out, and I can tell you that Bracebridge and Parish Council will do the same. So I'm sure involvement and engagement with town and parish councils will be important. And I'm just going to come to Councillor Scrutiny.
Just come back. Thank you. I entirely agree that this matter is urgent, and I think I preface my opening remarks saying that. I'm well aware of, as it were, the tilted balance, or whatever one wants to call it, the presumption in favour of development because we don't have a 5-year plan. I do think there are 2 issues here. The first is, as a matter of principle, it seems to me that it's wrong that this committee doesn't have an opportunity really to formulate matters to go to Cabinet. Well, that is what, according to the agenda, we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be, today, making suggestions on the draft island plan before Cabinet makes its decision to go to consultation. That's what we're here to do. None of us have had an opportunity really to do that. So as a matter of principle, I think it's wrong. Secondly, as a matter of reality, I'm always astounded being a new boy in council, just how long everything takes us. And I'm not someone who wants to delay. So I'm ready to form, I haven't even heard of such a thing, a task and finish group. Let's start next week. I've pretty much read this plan. Start next week and do it. Get a committee going. But it's not right in principle, in my view, that it should go, such an important matter should go out to public consultation before members have been consulted effectively, and members who are on committees who should have input. Now, you can't, the delay may only take, if this council could move quickly and form an ad hoc committee, may only have to be a week, may only have to be 2 weeks. I can certainly find a committee and deal with those matters in that time. But I believe we should be given that opportunity. One of the reasons is that there are fundamental issues. For example, there is in the National Planning Framework, as I'm sure everyone knows, there is an opportunity to claim an exceptional case. So the island could claim that it is an exceptional case and the housing rules and targets do not apply to it. Now, I think as a matter of, you can't, once you put out your draft plan, it's going to be very difficult and even more delay If then in the course of public consultation, for example, the cabinet and then council decides that that's the way to go, to claim an exceptional case. And I think there's a strong case that can be made for an exceptional case. And if one looks at the draft plan, that's pretty much what we're saying in the draft plan, that the island is unique, that it's exceptional. I don't know if the word exceptional is used, but it clearly implies that we can't build enough houses because of the intervention of the solent. It's all in the plan. And we may, in my view, be missing a significant opportunity to get this right. Now, I don't want delays, and I'm horrified at developers latching on to this absence of a 5-year plan and holding us to ransom. But if it's practical and possible for a delay of 2 to 3 weeks, say, and then go to consultation, I think that would be the democratic way of doing it. I think it would be the way of doing it in accordance with this agenda. And I think it would be the better outcome for the public. And given that they've waited however long it is, certainly since the last public consultation, which I think was 2 years ago, 3 weeks won't make any difference.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Right, I'm just going to... Councillor Price, did you raise your hand?
Yeah.
You first.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, yeah, following on what Peter just said, I mean, you know, I do understand where he's coming from. I'm asking with everyone here, what is the chance of the task and finish group being started, perhaps, I don't know whether it has to happen a chairman, I can't remember, but someone who leads the group could be Peter. He's obviously keen to get it into action quite quickly. Is it something that then could come back to the next cabinet agenda? So it could come back to the very next cabinet meeting with the results of the task and finish group? I appreciate that might be possible, but
it's a question. Councillor Price.
Yeah, but I get Councillor Price's intentions, which are good. The trouble is we're still, working with what the system that we inherited. The next cabinet isn't until 2 years after the next scrutiny committee. That is the pattern we inherited. We can't change everything overnight. That is the system. Councillor Spink is the only new member of this committee, so he obviously wasn't aware that scrutiny committee has the ability to set up task and finish groups. That I'm sure that could be set up reasonably quickly, but it depends on resource. And we have a scrutiny officer who doesn't work full time anymore. Very luckily. There's a limit to how much support he can give because there hasn't been the resource put into scrutiny over recent years. When you could set one up, the work could be done with willing volunteers, but where's it going to? It's going to go to September meetings. You start suggesting having meetings in August. Well, as former Councillor Richard Holler said, meetings in August, I sail in August. That being his legacy is not a white councillor. Well, I could look if you want to organise, cabinets and scrutiny committees in August. I'll be there. I'll tell you what, it won't be. Thank you, Chair.
You are correct, he is sailing in August, and I'm house sitting for him.
All right.
I'm going to go to the chief executive.
Thank you, Chair. I thought it might be useful just to clarify that the decision to go to consultation is absolutely a decision of the executive administration. There is no requirement in the Constitution for them to come and consult in advance with the corporate scrutiny committee. They can choose to do so if they wish to, take those comments on board, and then shape the consultation. But the way that the Constitution is set out, the way that the legislation is set out, that is a matter for the executive to determine. The corporate scrutiny committee can, of course, look at that decision, review the consultation document as has been described, and I'm quite sure in this case it could be done concurrently with the document that's already been produced, largely because I guess I would pose the question to members that by the time we complete that consultation document, we might have a different document that some other people would be comfortable with as well. And at some point, we have to jump on the wheel almost, and get on with the consultation to get the views back from the public, so that we can shape the next iteration of the document, which Council already referred to for the further consultation in February. So I think we've got a good process that we can go through to take all those comments on board and to take those things into account. So but just doing that one back on the share. Second point, it's really just to invite members to look at the island plan through a slightly different lens, and Councillor Jones-Evans almost stole my thunder on that, because I think we need to look at the plan as being about appropriate development. So what's the development that's going to deal with some of the issues that we heard about earlier on the meeting? So our lack of affordable housing, how are we going to create the jobs to deal with the jobs issues that we heard about earlier? And so again, we've got to be careful about not slowing things down, because they are big issues that are rushing us to see us and we need to deal with. And I think the third point we need to take into account in terms of agreeing the plan or taking the plan forward is that this has to go to an independent planning inspector for sign-off and approval and test. And therefore we need to make sure that whatever we put to an independent planning inspector is absolutely robust and been through a very robust process. And I think a nearly 9-week consultation process is a really good start to that. And then that also depends on how we take on board those comments that come back with. So I hope that helps with the debate. I'm sure it'll go in a slightly different way, but probably.
Thank you for that. Right, I'm going to go to Councillor Lilly, and then Councillor Bacon and Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Councillor Hastings. I think it's important, and perhaps for councillors to know that this committee has actually done a number of tasks in Finnish Group, and has actually finished a report before various strategies have actually been pulled together. We did it on housing. We did actually very good at housing strategy task and Finnish Group, which actually fed in to housing, and it was very much developed some of the things. I don't think enough of it was actually used, but that's a sign. We did it in regards to the commercialisation strategy. We were way ahead. I'm sure Wendy Pereira would agree that we were actually ahead of the game in developing that, and actually influence and involve that. So I think that and I would be committed to join the working group. Happy that Councillor Spoon perhaps chair it or lead it of that. And I know I'm sure there'll be a number of others that would contribute to that. You don't start the journey until you actually start walking. So from today, let's walk. We can walk at a good pace, and we can. The most important thing is getting the consultation, is getting the activity of Hawk and iWalk and actually those town and parish councils, because they're the ones who are seeing it on the ground, and they haven't been. And my last point I would like to put is we have to not only thank Councillor Fuller for doing that, but actually the planning department. If you go into Seacrest, there's no one there. They are working from home. They've had sickness. They've really been hit by a department during COVID. And these officers did all that, and all the increase, huge increase in planning applications last year, they produced this. Right? I would question why it wasn't, before, and what was actually going on. And I think we have a duty to them, because they've had to really, push. They've still got to do all the day work, the planning applications, but they've pulled this out, and I think we need to thank them to get into that. Doing that. Thank you.
Absolutely agree. However, of course, this wasn't put together in 5 minutes. It has been ongoing for some while. And Councillor Abraham, of course, has been talking about previously, but that's another matter. Now I'm going to just move across to Councillor Lee.
Thank you. It is a very brief point. It's essentially a point of information, and to some extent the Chief Executive dealt with it. Councillor Speak, the decision on Thursday is not to approve the plan, but it's to approve the fact of consultation.
No, I
More than that.
I do understand that.
And I think that everything that's being said here is part of the consultation process, and as said before, it's better that it is in the public. And indeed, the points about potentially pursuing exceptional circumstances and so on, those will be dealt with in briefings, and no doors are being closed, as Councillor Floyd will confirm. So we can do all this as we should in public.
Thank you. Councillor Floyd.
Yeah, this is in response to Councillor Speak, the exceptional circumstances, as Councillor Bacon has just said, we have sought advice. I think one of the things that was important was to suppress that number that was incredibly high at one stage, and this council has sought advice from council on the housing figures so we can get it to a much more sustainable level. So that has already happened. A lot of work has gone behind the scenes. James Miller and his team have done a huge amount of work looking into those figures. So please rest assured, Councillor Speak, that's happened. One of the major things that I am pushing for within the consultation is this is going to go out on the road. We're not going to see another monkey survey or something. It's not going to be anything like that. We're actually going out and we're going to be meeting, talking to people, talking to residents, talking to communities, talking to developers, and talking to town and parish councils face to face. Hopefully, no sort of like outbreak of COVID pending, but we want to talk to people. Face-to-face consultation is something we have to be very good at, and it's my commitment as a cabinet member and a member of the new administration that we go out and we talk to people and we properly engage and just don't leave it to silly consultations by IT, because that's not the right way to get the feedback that I'm service. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Smith.
May I just ask if Council's opinion, Council's advice will be made available to the Task and Finish Committee? Because the reason I ask it is this, is that if there is a good legal reason from a planning barrister or SIL, I don't know which, that, for example, exceptional circumstances is difficult to argue, then that would have a very persuasive weight, as it were, on any findings that the Task and Finishing Committee would come to. In other words, I think there is a real matter of policy here, whether, for example, I don't think everyone talks about sort of public consultation feeding in to the plan, but my understanding is, I may be wrong, that you can't put in a plan and then change it. You can't go out, it's very difficult to go out to public consultation and then change your plan completely to a claim for exceptional circumstances. That's my point. And in deciding what our tax should be, whether it should be the current tax, which is to say that it's not deliverable to build the 640 houses, it's only deliverable to build the 486, is based on undeliverability. We may have a better argument and a stronger argument if we took the exceptional circumstances route. And I would like to see, if you have a SILK advice on this, the SILK's advice. Yes, so I hope you for me to see it. Thank you.
I'm wondering if Wendy Brewer would like to say something on that.
In a minute.
I don't have a microphone, but I will shout. Now I've got 6 microphones. I think the issue of the Task and Finish group, if you want to consider input to this first consultation draft of the plan, is to ascertain and seek reassurance on some of those options that you may not yet be fully aware of because they have been discussed in working groups that have drawn up the plan. And we would need to consider the amount of detail that would be provided to the task and finish group in doing that. So I think there's an option for the task and finish group to consider the exceptional circumstances case. There is nothing that precludes, through the consultation period, a review of staying with the deliverability argument or moving to the exceptional circumstances case, because that will all feed into your final consultation draft. And I think the other matter that scrutiny needs to be aware of course, is that the final decision on this plan being submitted for examination is a full council decision after consideration by the executive. So there is still a considerable opportunity for discussion at various committee and deciding bodies level. But certainly this is a first consultation draft and can be amended as we move forward with the documentation.
Thank you for that. Councillor Smith, does that clear us up a little bit for you?
It clears them up sufficiently for the purposes now. I think I'd like to say this, that I'm always prepared to change my mind when I hear argument to the contrary. And whilst I'm disappointed that it can't go to committee and be resolved in a matter of weeks, if it would mean a delay until September, then I agree that that is unsatisfactory. I think it's unsatisfactory, to be frank, that this council couldn't get a committee together and deal with it before the August recess, but there it is. But in the circumstances, if I'm given a fait accompli that my motion would mean that there would be a delay until September, then I'm persuaded that that ought not to take place, and I will withdraw my motion.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. It's a difficult one. I fully understand your perspective and the principle involved. However, I feel this committee feels. I think that we should run this in tandem, which is what Councillor Brody and Councillor Billy were suggesting. There's no reason to hold up the consultation whilst we also have a task and finish group running alongside it and get to grips with it, which I'm sure we'll enjoy it and we want to. So therefore we have, has anybody else any questions or comments? Councillor Lilly.
I just wanted to reassure Councillor Smith that the task and finish group would set the questions that it wants to actually get answers to. And we can then seek expertise, whether it's through LGA or other sources, or talk to other authorities, whatever. We decide the agenda in that group and the questions that we want to ask and people we want to involve in that. Total agree with that. The first meeting would be to set those questions that we want to actually get answered.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I think we've had some good results as well from task and finish groups. Councillor Stevens.
Only a couple of lines. If you're going to make a recommendation to Cabinet, which is what this is about, make sure it's succinct and to the point, because we've gone and manoeuvred around a little bit here. And if I'm going to discuss with Cabinet colleagues on points coming through from this Corporate Scrutiny Committee, I want to know exactly what I'm talking to. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, of course, that will be the case. And so, I think it was Councillor Brody's proposal, was it? Do we have the wording for that, or would you like to give it again?
So I can give it again, Chairman?
Yes, please do.
It's the committee supports the Cabinet proposal regarding consultation for the task and finish group be established by this committee to include councillors from the Policy and Scrutiny Committee for Neighbourhood and Regeneration to formulate a submission as part of the consultation process.
To the September.
To the September.
Or to the September Corporate Scrutiny Committee and then Cabinet.
Okay, happy with that? And Councillor Lilly, you are seconding, am I correct? Okay, therefore, members, all those in favour?
That's unanimous.
It's unanimous, yes, thank you very much. Okay. Moving right along. The next one is a decision paper for specialist provision for September 21 and update on public consultations. And so, Councillor Drew.
Yes, I'm keen for us to move on. I think this is a good paper. I don't know about anybody else, but I get lobbied constantly about specialist provision. As a local member, I have a special school within my ward as well, the Medina House School. I think the extra provision that's proposed within this paper is to be supported. I propose that this committee welcomes the report. Thank you.
And I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments, questions? Okay. Yeah, I've just been, there's an item on the Cabinet agenda, item 14. This is the development of the Southampton City Culture Bid 2025, which members might wish to discuss.
Chair, we've got the amendments as well.
Oh, yes, right. Yeah, let's do that first. The amendment to the academic year term dates 2021 to 22. Any comments from members? Questions?
Chair, no.
Just noted. Councillor Lilly, you have your microphone on. Did you want to say something? Okay. Okay, so that's noted.
Chair, just before you bring in the city closure, can I just make a comment for Democratic Services to take forward? Sorry, Marie. But the page numbers referred to in the Cabinet agenda bear little relationship to the reports within there. You might want to have a look at it. Some of them are close, but I spent a good 5 minutes hunting through it to find the right transport interchange project delivery report, which is I counted 15 pages out. Okay, so it might be useful to have something for the Cabinet members, but they're not as bright as me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. That I think has been noticed before as well. So. Okay, we come on to the City of Culture, Southampton City of Culture 2025. Members, any comments, questions? Councillor Brown.
Yeah, Chair, sorry, just to say something quickly. I think this, again, we should welcome this report. This is a significant opportunity. It does involve some expenditure, whether it's expenditure I think in this field that the Council's worked in over recent times. There's something to be welcomed. I think it's a really excellent opportunity for the ROI to be associated with the City of Culture status. Thank you, Chair. I propose we welcome it.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Lee.
I wish to second it. I think the whole area of culture, cultural industries generate employment, and we need to build that. And we have a wonderful heritage of carnivals and festivals on our island, and we have an incredible amount of writers, filmmakers, bands, etc. It is our USP, really, and I think building the links with Southampton, and I also, from a right point of view, building our links with Portsmouth, is very, very important because these sound on gateways. These are where the universities are. And we need to build our relationships much stronger with Southampton and Portsmouth, because that's where people go on the ferries too. So I totally support this. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other questions, comments? Well, I would just say that I totally agree, and I think the spin-off to the island must be good and this and this. That people aren't just going to go to Southampton and finish there. And in fact, there will be pamphlets, brochures, etc. in Southampton saying get to the island. So, as far as I'm concerned, yeah, it's got to be a good thing. And money well spent. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the word of support from this important committee. I just wanted to highlight, if anyone hasn't had a chance to read yet, the strategy for regeneration that was published in June 2019. There's a whole chapter in there of cultural regeneration and what it means. And so this is really just accelerating many of the themes, threads and outputs that this council document outlines, so it's really, really important. Just to pick up a bit sort of headlines on this, cultural and environmental assets, you know, what can these do, what can these assets do to assist us with the issues that we're facing? But it attracts and grows jobs, that pays higher wages. It protects and capitalises our unique environment and cultural heritage, obviously the biosphere, a massive part of that. It reduces deprivation levels in affected areas on the island, and it changes perceptions of the island and its future amongst those who live here and those who may want to relocate, invest and visit. And in fact, when we look at what Coventry, through the current City of Culture, they've had an enormous amount of investment just in the last 4 years since they were named City of Culture. It's been an enormous input into the city with their public realm, public consultation, and just the whole thing has already made the city rise up. So for us to be partners with Southampton, it's really, really exciting. It's part of what we want to do as an island. And when Councillor Baker and I had our meeting with the director of the bid team for Southampton, you know, they were overwhelmed by what we had to offer, really. Because we have got so much. And so be able to partner with, you know, a big city like Southampton is an amazing opportunity for the island, and we're going to make the most of it when they get announced City of Culture May next year.
Fabulous, thank you. Yes, and strangely, one odd time that I wasn't listening to Otherway Radio this morning, I listened to Virgin Radio. Chris Evans spent a good 30 minutes praising the island. How bad is that? Super.
You want to put my memo?
I will read it. Okay, thank you. So we've got this sort of noted over here. Right, so members, we move on to the forward plan. Is there anything in this skeleton of forward plan and you might want to put into our work plan? Councillor Rowe.
Yes, Chair, just to prove that I'm going to be very even-handed. Having looked at the current forward plan, I wonder if the leader of the council can explain to me what they're doing after tonight.
That's a very good question. Leader. Wow.
Chair, I think my point is that the forward plan needs to be used by cabinet members. I have no doubt that there are decisions and plans in place, but they're omitting to tell Democratic Services to put it in the forward plan. So it's a bit of a slap on the wrist from me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I would just slightly add to that. I know it's what's early days and what isn't, I don't know. I refer to the corporate plan of the new administration that clearly will be coming forward at some point, and I would actually ask the question of the leader if she has any idea when that might be forthcoming. Meanwhile, while you're looking, I'm going to go to Councillor Bacon, as I see his hand is raised.
So I've been a most sanitised microphone suddenly. I just thought I'd just interject here. I think there may have been an administrative glitch, certainly I picked up today, that an item that I've asked to go forward plan doesn't seem to appear where it should. Climate change strategy, which is down to September, alongside, I think, the corporate plan is also down for that date as well. So, cabinet members, certainly for my part, we are putting things forward, and I like Councillor Brody, a little puzzled why they're not appearing. There's certainly no indicator of lack of forthcoming activity.
Okay, thank you for that. Yes, that was the other one that I was going to query, was the climate environment strategy. It was due to the object on the agenda for the 10th of June, of course, but one understands these changes happen and things move on. Councillor Andre, if you don't break the place apart, you may speak.
It still works. Fantastic. On the forward plan, I think there is actually a typo, as we've seen, that was on the agenda for tonight, but will be discussed at Cabinet closure at Harrisburg College. That should actually be Cabinet from the 5th of July rather than November.
Yes, you are absolutely right. Little point in discussing it again in November. Councillor Brody.
Yeah, just one other issue, which is on the front page of the forward plan, which I've also noticed creeping in. Councillor Stephen hasn't noticed that doesn't actually report him as being a cabinet member for community safety as well as digital transformation. I've noticed that on the report to cabinet as well. You might want to just get that correct.
Yes, I did notice that. I wondered where community safety had gone, but I assume it is still with you, Councillor Stevens.
Yes, it is, and I can pick up anything that move along with it. I'm quite happy to take on someone and make it on build their roof as well, as I can.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions or comments from members on the forward plan? Thought you were raising your hands there. No, I was just checking. Okay, right, moving right along, we've got a work plan. Before I go into the work plan, there was a question. Councillor Brody, you asked a question last meeting about the legal services. We all had the answer back on that. My question really is there anything further you wish to do?
Yeah, well, I'm going to comment, but I think Councillor Lilly would also like to follow on this because he asked supplementary. Well, we got a response from Mr. Thorne, the strategic manager for legal services, which was, frankly, I couldn't believe how complex the response was to what was a fairly straightforward question, to be honest. And it just made me wonder, why are we managing legal cases in the way we do? It just seemed bizarre, to be frank. And I'm not surprised we have a massive backlog after the last few years. I think Councillor Lilly wants to ask a specific question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lilly.
I think it was more, I'm actually putting forward a recommendation, looking at the answer coming back. I think we do need to optimise the use of our considerable legal services team. And I think that definitely what we got back was that there seems to be dealing with perhaps a lot of cases that perhaps we shouldn't be dealing with. There's some that side. And there needs to be the correct allocation of external legal work for skills of all capacity. A maximum use of our very significant external discounts that we can actually get, because obviously we're a prime client to a lot of services, but probably especially now, we might get a better deal now than post-COVID. And just really wanted to feed those points in. I think that the Cabinet Member for Resources, quite a long title that Councillor Christian has, but I know that he has taken those questions and looked into those and is very keen to see these things put into account. So I would like to put a proposal from those big questions that we put and support the Cabinet member, Councillor Jarman, to optimise the use of our considerable legal services team, 2, the correct allocation of external legal skills or capacity, and 3, maximum use of very significant external discounts.
I'll second that. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Has Councillor really got that written down?
I can flick it over to me.
Yes, Chief Executive.
If I may comment, I fully understand where members are coming from on this one, but I think in deference to the rest of the committee haven't got that level of information that Councillor Murray and Councillor Lilly have on which they could make a decision.
Especially it was shared.
I will share. I hadn't realised it didn't.
Yes, all committee members have got it, yeah, that's why.
I'm quiet.
That's why I was posing it, yeah. Councillor John.
Yes, Chair, if I may. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak. It is clear that the work of our legal group is very valued and is quite complex. It's also quite clear that at the moment we don't believe that it's optimised as much as it could be. One of the classic examples there is that there is no obligation within the organisation at the moment that all legal cases are processed through our legal services team. So the proposal, which I think has been shared, encapsulates a number of small changes, and some of those I understand are being discussed at the moment between legal services and our monitoring officer, because they may involve some word changes to full council. We would very much like to optimise the situation, so first of all, that all legal cases within the organisation do indeed go through our legal services department. That gives them visibility, it gives them control and management, and it means we have better oversight of those cases as they're being processed. Secondly, we do have the need to outsource to a number of bodies cases where we don't have particular skills or capacity. And again, with all cases going through legal services, we'll be able to optimise that process. And thirdly, we do, through our legal services department, have negotiated external terms, which in some cases can be as high as a 50% discount. And by putting them through legal services, we can ensure that at every opportunity those discounts are applied and utilised. So some very key actions we need to do. I would be obliged if this scrutiny committee would look into those, and indeed if in some wording can accept those and recommend them, that would be very beneficial to our current action plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yes, Chairman, the proposal was that Cabinet member be supported in seeking to optimise the use of our considerable legal services team, the correct allocation of external legal work for skills or capacity, and to maximise the use of our very significant external discounts.
Okay, that's proposed by Councillor Brody and seconded by Councillor Lilly. Oh, is it the other way around? Right, the other way around. Those in favour, members?
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Another unanimous. We're working well tonight. Thank you. And I assume we'll put that onto our work plan as well, the future efforts. Thank you. Which brings me on to work plan and our meeting, which was Wednesday, 30th of June, where we met. There was myself, Councillor Brody, Councillor Mosdale speaking quickly, and Councillor Houston and Weedle. And we discussed what we're going to put on, what we'd like to put onto our work plan going forward. And the matters that we listed were to review of the investment strategy, review of the capital strategy, review of income generation strategy, social value in purchasing arrangements, one public service outcomes, planning and development of housing policies, joint work with the Policy and Scrutiny Committee for Neighbourhoods and Regeneration, communication and consultation, property disposals and the asset management plan. Do members have any comments, questions, or are you happy with that? Councillor Brody.
Yes, it sounds absolutely an enormous list when you read it out. Yeah, it's, and would require a lot of involvement by members of this committee. So my advice is to, Councillor Lilly said that you walk before you want to get somewhere. We need to take it steady. We need to plan them out. The corporate plan will also have to come out sometime in September, and that will also shape the work plan to be in the land meeting. But I remember the first time I sat in that chair back in May 2006 when I had a similar meeting and came up with a list of about 30 board members that, mine was a lot more resources in those days, wasn't it, Board? And I had a fairly willing team, to be frank, because we had cooperative members of the public on the council, on the committee as well. But I mean, I set a really, rigorous work plan for the future, which was going to be unachievable, to be frank. So you have to be careful about it. But there's some good stuff on there. The one I think I'm most interested in, I know Council Quigley was, is social values, purchasing and procurement, which I don't think the council pays any attention to.
Thank you for that. Yes, and I tend to agree that there's probably so many issues and things you want to deal with. Walk before you run is a good point. What I would suggest is perhaps we pick 1, 2 or 3, a couple out of these, and I think you're right, social value in purchasing arrangements is a good one. If members want to put maybe another one for now, but keep this list running on our part of our work plan potentials, and as you rightly pointed out, of course, that will change, but potentially when we see the corporate plan, our work plan will be made up of that. Does that make sense? Paul? He says yes. So, okay. So therefore, is there another one out of that list, for instance? So if we pick 2 now that we would put into our work plan, we've got social value and purchasing arrangements. Is there another one that we see as quite important?
What about investments?
Yeah, I thought that as well, actually. Yeah, so if we had A and D, that's a review of the investment strategy and social value and purchasing arrangements. Do members agree? And Councillor Lilly wants to speak.
I just wanted to, the investment one also links to what's already on our work plan about the commercialisation strategy, right? Because that was part of that, particularly the investment of buying property on the mainland, commercial property on the mainland. And that leads to a question is, do we now have a commercial strategy? Because originally we had a study or report from this committee, and I must have missed that the strategy was actually put in place. Because we can only obviously monitor something if it's actually there. And I also feel there needs to be a question to the Alliance Cabinet. Are they going to adopt it? Because obviously, if it's there, it was adopted by the previous administration.
That's a good point. I mean, I remember quite a lot of progress on the commercial strategy, but I can't remember the end game. So, can anybody enlighten us on that? Councillor John.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor. We do need to have a commercial strategy at the moment. I'm also not too sure whether it was ever actually put into effect, but I can assure you that we are in the process of actively upgrading it at the moment. we've had some discussions on that. The same is true, by the way, of many of the items that you've just read out on your expensive list. Many of those are currently being reviewed and upgraded. I have to say that in that process, they will not all come at once. So perhaps we can assist you in your committee by giving you a schedule of when they might be likely to come out, so that you can put them in at the appropriate time on your work plan.
Excellent, thank you. That's what I like. Cooperation. Councillor Lee.
Can I just make one point, particularly the point raised by Councillor Brody on social value? The actual commercialisation report, which was cross-party, actually had social value as a key part of it, and said that actually as a local council, you could not have a commercial strategy unless you had social value built within it. What was quite interesting was I do feel that certain members of the previous administration wanted to take that out, because I know that Councillor Tyndall at the time, ex-councillor, Mr. Tyndall, ex-councillor Mr. Tyndall, was very passionate about keeping that social value brought in.
Yes, yeah, absolutely would be. He and I work on that essentially. Okay. Anybody else? Some questions? No? Then we shall move right along. Quickly, come to members' questions. And I look to the gallery and I see a member with a question. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chairman. I actually have a question for you. Okay. I know you're a keen environmentalist. I base my question on comments made by Councillor Brody when he looked at the quarterly report and in particular the PFI. I'd just like to add more information to the questions or the answers that he had.
Chair, this is supposed to be a question.
Yeah, it is. Hedges, verges, overgrown. And the reason for that is Green Lobby want wildflowers and rewilding. Weeds, stop. Why have we got so many weeds? Because we don't like the weed killer. There we go. Lighting intensity of street lighting. That was reduced to...
Can I just push you to the question?
Yes, it is. Okay, I'll cut it short. Street lighting levels were reduced to do away with light pollution, reduce light pollution. Okay. Litter bins.
Yeah,
litter bins.
Councillor, I'm going to have to push you to an actual question.
Okay, the question is to you, Chairman.
Yeah,
do you believe these actions are supported by the Green Lobby?
Sorry, can you give me the question?
Yeah, well, would you agree that these actions were supported by the Green Lobby?
Well, they probably were, or possibly would be.
They would be.
I'm not speaking for them, but I will speak for myself, and I certainly supported them. But when I pushed them forward, these particular ideas, I made clear that it should be done in league with town and parish councils, that they put forward their suggestions and requirements and etc. in their own areas, and make sense of it with our roads. So it's a bit of a combination of things.
It's not just within us.
Thank you for your question. Members, any other questions from the members? Councillor Hughes.
When would be a suitable time for this committee and the Island Council to consider allowing voting rights to IVOG in this committee? There have been various points today that we would have liked to have supported or put an extra comment, And I like that. So the question is, when can it be reviewed?
Gina, I think that's a really good question, and it would have my support, frankly, because we've just, as you rightly say, we've been talking all night about the involvement and interest of town borough councils. So, Councillor Brody.
Chair, Mrs. Houston would be delighted to know in the agenda published for the Isle of Wight Full Council only this afternoon, there is a report regarding restoring some elements of the democracy lost on this council.
Councillor, just put your microphone
back. It's not working, isn't that? And restoring some elements of the democracy lost in the previous 4 years, and one of the proposals is to restore the voting right of the representative from ILOC, but not from HUNC. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's good to hear, and I think I know it's been released now, the agenda. I haven't looked at myself yet, but I'm pleased to see that's on there. Excellent. Any further or more questions from members? No. Therefore, at 10 minutes to 8, meeting